Hi everyone, welcome to the TBR Webinar series. Today, Ezra Gottheil and Dan Callahan will be discussing IoT is getting a lot easier. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see you can access the slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, and our survey. After the webinar, you'll receive an email with a replay link as well as a link to view and register for other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them in the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the event at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us, and here's Ezra to begin the webinar.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for attending. Let's go past our pictures really quickly and address our introduction. Today we want to talk about our predictions for this coming year, for 2019, and for years beyond that. And as always, the best way to look at the direction that we're heading is to look backwards to some extent. And we're treating the era of IoT as basically the past 3 years. Now, IoT has been around for at least a decade or two for individual projects done a one-off at a time by large companies that needed them. But the real wave of interest in IoT started about 3 years ago, and we've seen some definite changes and evolution in IoT, and we see that those changes foreshadowing what's going to happen over the next several years. The graphic on this slide, so when we talk about IoT being mature for its age, rather, we're talking about the 3-year-old IoT. It's come a long way, and it's coming a long way means that the products and offerings have come a long way, the vendors have come a long way, the channel has come a long way, and the customers have come a long way. That's to be expected and hoped for something as important as IoT and something as complex as IoT. And we've spoken about the fact that it's not a technology and not a market, but in fact a technique, a way of thinking about how to solve business problems, giving the potential of the integration of the physical world with the IT world. In 3 years, most people involved have come to a greater understanding. Use case patterns have emerged, products have evolved, vendors have more closely identified what they're going to offer, and they're getting along better in the ecosystem as we're going to talk about. The growth curve, which is our estimate for the amount of revenue to be gathered by predominantly IT-oriented companies out of IoT, continues to have the same general shape. We've been tweaking it for a while, and the characteristics of the shape are that growth is moderate. It's nice, solid growth in the mid-20%, but it is also accelerating. But the key characteristic is that it will continue for a long time. And we've explained the reason for that, which is that it's not a market. It is a category of solutions. Each one has to have its own entry into the market, its own growth rate, and when you add them up together, you get this gradually accelerating curve. A gradually accelerating curve which will eventually lead to IoT being really enormous and really important. It is already a major contributor to revenue for a lot of the vendors playing in it, but it's still minor compared with other things except for new IoT-specific entrants. So one of our predictions is that the ecosystem, the complex of vendors and channel providers of hardware, software, services, will sort itself out. It's already begun, this process of companies identifying what they offer and therefore who they need to work with to deliver products. Another prediction is that bundles and packages will proliferate. We've been predicting this for a while, and we've certainly seen a real uptick in interest. This is critical for the broad adoption of IoT, and we have lots of evidence, and we see the direction that it's going. And finally, the issue of data economics. How much data do you gather? What do you do with it? Where do you store it? Is critical to the decisions about IoT solutions. So we see those 3 trends accelerating, particularly in the coming year, and becoming more and more important going forward. The vendors in this world face a number of challenges. The first one is finding their niche in the ecosystem, defining what they do, and defining what other products, services, and vendors complement what they do, so that together they can A, put together solutions, and B, address the market. This is an important process, and we continue to recommend that vendors pay very close attention to the nature of the other vendors in the market, vendors of their own type that they will be competing with, and vendors of complementary types that they will be collaborating with to help deliver solutions. Next, the issue here is lowering the barriers to entry. Again, looking backward, when we first started talking about IoT, there was a great deal of talk about transformation and business model changing and the invention of new solutions, all of which are very expensive and very high-risk kinds of ventures. And that makes it hard to grow the IoT business because each customer will be very hesitant to go forward on that. What we're seeing is an increasing utilization of smaller scale, more modest kinds of IoT products, especially those provided in bundles and packages, making it easier to get started in IoT, to build up a knowledge and infrastructure for IoT, and to continue the utilization of this technique to solve business problems, because it never stops with just one IoT solution. IoT solutions build on each other, build on integration with existing data, and offer examples from which additional IoT solutions can be generated, all of which contribute value to the business. The channel is important not only in selling your product, communicating well with the customer, but also in helping shape, mold, and in some case, deliver the solution. The channel needs to be developed to bring the end customer to a satisfactory value-added solution, and that is a real challenge. So a lot of the IoT effort by vendors of software, hardware, and services is nurturing the ecosystem relationships with other vendors, also nurturing the ecosystem relationship with the channel, and helping evolve the channel to where it can best serve both the customer and the vendor. And finally, again, looking at that curve we showed in the first slide, this curve of growth, substantial but non-explosive growth, it requires patience. Patience is difficult when you're trying to grow a business. You always want to know, when does it finally take off? It also dictates the fact that you have to adjust their costs to correspond to your expected return as the business grows. So let's get into the predictions. The first one we made was the ecosystem map will become clearer and more detailed. And what's happened is that vendors are defining what they bring to the table much more clearly. They're defining it to themselves. We produce these given products that play a role in IoT. And they may be IoT-specific products, or they may be general-purpose products that are applied to IoT. They find other vendors that complement those offerings, that together can meet the needs of the customers and contribute to an IoT solution, or a competition, and they know who they have to compete with to deliver a good solution. So what we're seeing is that as companies define themselves and project that definition out into the ecosystem, they are now recognizing other companies, other vendors, other channel partners that can work with them to make together solutions that can deliver value to customers. This has already begun to happen, but we think there's still a long ways to go, but we think that we are definitely seeing a positive trend in that direction. Basically, this is a response to, we do IoT, we do everything, we do end-to-end solutions. We provide general purpose IoT. That wasn't working. That created uncertainty in the market. It created high entry costs for customers. It created barriers to entry. And what is necessary is to accelerate the process of going from customer problem to solution. And that requires that you assemble the piece parts as well as possible, and that in turn requires that you find the parts that work well with your parts to deliver a solution. And the end result is now is easier than it was 3 years ago, and it will be easier going forward than it is now to assemble solutions, to know, oh, I need this part, I need this form of analysis, I need this kind of sensor, I need this kind of security solution, I need this kind of data storage solution, I need this kind of edge device, and put them together. The process of going from problem to invention to design to solution is much, much smoother and will get smoother going forward, and that makes it easier to do the things, lowers the entry cost, and drives up the number of solutions in the market. Dan is going to talk about some examples of more clarity in the ecosystem.
Yeah, hi everyone, this is Dan. I just wanted to share some examples that we're seeing. We can start with IBM and Vodafone. Vodafone and IBM recently announced a deep partnership, including something nearing a joint venture, where both companies will create an office and share employees, which will work together to build and deliver solutions. We believe Vodafone struggled offering the volume of managed and cloud services necessary for IoT. Vodafone will rely on IBM to fill that expertise gap. I expect IBM will try to leverage Vodafone as a channel for SMBs. Operators have a relationship with just about every SMB, and SMBs are an area that IBM struggles to reach due to its enterprise-level transformation orientation. However, SMBs are a huge greenfield opportunity for packaged solutions, and it's important for IBM to address. Both companies will use each other to innovate where they struggle. I expect IBM will leverage Vodafone for connectivity expertise, whereas Vodafone will leverage IBM's expertise in AI, cloud, and services. We could also look at Ericsson. A little over a year ago, the company was investing in a multitude of aspects around IoT, developing an IoT platform and offering a broad portfolio of services. We believe Ericsson has greatly reduced its scope in IoT, focusing on device connectivity management and operator edge compute, as well as its core business of providing connectivity products and services primarily for operators. This focus will allow Ericsson to pool development around core competencies instead of broader but less impactful technology, and provide more aligned solutions to its core customer segment. And finally, we have the triangle of PTC, Rockwell Automation, and Microsoft. In 2018, we believe PTC put a greater emphasis on collaborating with partners, strengthening its ecosystem, and enhancing partners with its family of products and solving business problems. The strategy was reinforced with two key alliances. A partnership with Rockwell Automation, which aimed at a joint go-to-market and sales acceleration for both companies in manufacturing and healthcare. Rockwell Automation made a $1 billion equity investment in PTC, showing the gravity of the partnership. PTC also selected Microsoft as a preferred cloud platform for its manufacturing customers and will also leverage Microsoft services. Ultimately, Microsoft and Rockwell Automation are also partners, setting up a robust connected ecosystem where PTC is focused on delivering best-in-class tools that enhance IoT, such as CAD product, lifecycle management, ThingWorx, and Kepware. Rockwell Automation is covering the OT divide, acting as an OT translator and opening up relationships that are hard to reach for Microsoft and PTC. And finally, Microsoft is providing IT enterprise support due to its well-known brand and well-accepted horizontal IoT solutions, including its robust cloud platform and services, as well as enterprise relationships that are hard to access by PTC and Rockwell Automation. And now I'll pass it back to Ezra.
Thank you, Dan. So let's talk about the next prediction, that bundles and packages will proliferate. Now, as I said, this has already begun, and we've been talking about it for a while, but we think the pace is definitely picking up, and we'll see more and more of them. So more and more solutions will be presented as a kit or product form, and the distinction between bundles and packages is the amount of customization and modification that is available or necessary. Bundles require more modification, more installation, and packages are basically standalone, and they should start themselves. They're really a kind of continuum of solutions that range from standalone, just plug it in and it works, to here are the components and some directions on how to build them. But what we're seeing is this lowers the barrier to entry. Now, all of this is about the fact that the majority of IoT solutions, and where the growth is in IoT solutions, is in less ambitious solutions than we first talked about, than the transformational business model changing ones. Most of the drivers for IoT solutions are solutions that reduce the costs to the customer company. All this means is that in order for them to have a positive ROI, the cost of the solution has to be smaller than the reduction in cost. So lowering the cost of IoT, lowering the barrier, makes more and more possible solutions feasible and justifiable. Buying a package where there's less invention, less selection of your own components, lowers that cost and lowers the barrier to entry. And that is the driver for this. The lower the entry cost, the more projects can be justified with that, the more projects will be undertaken. When you undertake more projects, you will be inclined to undertake even more projects as you understand the potential and see the utility elsewhere in your organization. And this leads to more and more solutions, and the net is a lot more revenue to vendors as more pieces fall into the puzzle and more of these cost-saving applications are deployed. Large companies often look to a custom solution for some core piece of their business. This can be very expensive, but even they are customers for packaged and bundled solutions for things that are not part of their core business, that are not part of the differentiation, where they simply want to run things more smoothly and more efficiently. Dan will talk now about one example of these kinds of bundles and packages.
So here we're looking at Sprint's packages. We believe Sprint is a good example of delivering IoT package solutions appealing to SMBs. While we won't make a blanket statement saying Sprint is the only one who has done this, it's an example of a major vendor organizing its products in this way. We don't see it as very commonplace among major other vendors that are participating in the IoT ecosystem. These packages are clear in purpose and easily digestible by SMBs that need point solutions, and the pricing is within reason for an SMB to adopt. We believe this presentation of IoT solutions is something that needs to be more widely adopted to spark wider IoT adoption by the large SMB base. I believe this setup could be an outcome for the IBM and Vodafone pairing I mentioned earlier. This could be a model for joint companies to better present and better market solutions to a wide SMB audience. And that's all I had to say about this, Ezra.
Thank you, Dan. If you look closely at the slide, you'll see that 3 out of the 6 solutions shown here, and these are not all the ones that Sprint is offering, are temperature monitoring solutions. There's temperature monitoring for food services, and there's temperature monitoring for healthcare, and there's one other. So what you see here is not only these packaged off-the-shelf solutions that lower the entry cost considerably, the prices are quite low, but you also see the way that use cases are emerging as things that can be mapped from one vertical to another, one sub-vertical to another. And these patterns and use cases help drive forward the creation of these bundles and kits. So, move on to the next one. Data isn't free. Acquiring the data isn't free. Storing the data isn't free. Processing the data isn't free. And if the cost of the solution is critical to its positive ROI, to its feasibility from a business sense, then managing the data, managing the amount of data, predicting it, assessing the utility of additional data, acquisition, storage, and processing, and transmission is critical to the success of individual IoT solutions. There is a tendency among vendors to say more data is always better, more analysis is always better, you're going to discover wonderful things. And that may be true, but in terms of assured, predictable ROI, reducing costs is critical. One of the consequences of paying attention to data costs is the rapid evolution of edge processing, where handling the data close to the acquisition point is a way of dealing with the data and then summarizing it, reducing the bulk of the data before it is stored long-term, before it is transmitted to either to the cloud or a central data center. So a key part of the design here is how much data do we actually need, and how will we what value will we acquire from that much data? What would be the marginal value acquired from acquiring or processing additional data? So it's a kind of complex economic prediction. Most IoT projects, as we said, are built to reduce costs. There's a limit to how much you can gain from reducing costs, and therefore the cost of the IoT solution becomes a very important part of the equation. The cost of the data becomes a very important part of the equation. One way is, as we said, in terms of storage and analysis. How much are you going to keep? How much are you going to analyze? But another way is data transmission. So we see solutions where things like narrowband IoT are used rather than cellular. It has much less bandwidth, but it also has a lower cost. If you can say, I don't need that precision in the data, I don't need that frequency of sampling, you can lower the cost of the solution by reducing the amount of data that is either acquired or kept around for processing. The same applies to analysis. How much analysis do I want to apply to these data? What additional value do I think I can gain by applying that additional analysis? So this becomes an integral part of the IoT design parameters. What are the economics of the data in my designs? And so you end up with the design of IoT solutions being a set of trade-offs around cost, which is what's true of almost everything else we build. So that makes perfect sense. And saying that more data is always better and more analysis is always better is not, A, not true, and B, not useful when the return from the acquisition and processing is limited. And so we'll see going forward a lot more attention on the cost effectiveness of solutions, and one way to produce more cost-effective solutions is to manage the data. Dan will talk about some of the efforts by vendors to make data easier and more accessible.
Yeah, as Ezra explained, data is expensive and not always valuable, and vendors are looking at ways to use that burden of data. We see three major groupings of vendors addressing the data problem. So we have ICT vendors that are focused on building edge platforms and equipment to take care workloads close to the source and reduce data transmission needs. Examples of these vendors building these edge platforms include Dell, Lenovo, and HPE. But there's plenty of others too. Cloud vendors are acutely aware of this shift and increasing customer acceptance of the edge framework. Since data and data crunching is the business of cloud giants, they are addressing the shift to edge with their own offerings to ensure that they keep their hands on the data and ultimately encourage data eventually making it to their cloud offerings. And examples of solutions by cloud vendors to address the edge include AWS Greengrass, Azure IoT Edge, Google Cloud IoT Edge, and IBM's Watson IoT Platform Edge. That one's a little bit of a handful. Operators are trying to reduce data costs to reduce the burden and improve profitability for themselves, as well as reduce costs for customers. Examples of technologies operators are focused on include mobile edge compute, 5G, and AI. While all participants have different end desires, with ICT vendors seeking more edge workloads, while cloud vendors and operators ultimately want more data to travel to the cloud, all the efforts combined are ultimately making IoT more affordable for customers. And that's all I had to say about that.
Thanks, Dan. So let's look a little beyond at some other trends we've spotted or directions we think things are going. So there's been a long talk about the collaboration between IT and OT to create IoT, and that is actually what is necessary to create a project, and has that lovely juxtaposition of words. It's important to bear in mind, of course, that operational technology is a very diverse set of technologies what's true on a factory floor may not be true on a farm or in a healthcare setting, whereas IT is pretty consistent. But what we're seeing, and this is already true, is that OT, the people with the problems, the people with the physical plant, the people with the need for greater efficiency are initiating IoT, and they're building it. They are collaborating with IT, and they rely on IT for shared resources and for compliance with standards and for creating data that is reusable and integrable with other data. What we're seeing increasingly is a recognition that you don't need a deep IT-OT collaboration at the beginning of the definition of the solution process. That is to say, OT can say, we think we want something that will do this and reduce this cost by using this data. Again, these monitoring solutions aren't sophisticated from an IT point of view. They're a reflection of the actual on-the-ground problems that the operations technology people have. And if they basically understand what can be done with that data, they can begin to specify what they'd like to build before they start the collaboration. That streamlines the whole invention process. It's accelerated, of course, by the fact that use case patterns have emerged, and will continue to emerge. People will begin to see, oh, I can build a project that's just like this one, only a little different. They don't need IT to come in. Now, IT is critically important to ensure the interoperability and security of what is eventually built. The ideal IoT project is one that feeds data into the company's whole database so that it can be reused and further leveraged, but not including both parties with a considerable amount of communications and collaboration at the very beginning of the cycle can really accelerate it. There are problems with this. In many cases, OT goes forward with a proof of concept, thinks they've built it, and IT comes along after they want to scale it, and they say, oh, that won't scale, or it's not secure. But as customers, both IT and OT, become more familiar with IoT, and as they implement more and more projects inside their organization, then this intense collaboration between IT and OT at the beginning of the cycle is less necessary. And I'm going to say something here that may offend some of you who are in IT, that is almost all of you, which is that it is easier for OT people to learn the basic requirements of IT than it is for IT people to learn the basic requirements of OT. The OT is a much more diverse space. It's specific to the business. IT is more a central set of principles that have to do with interoperability and security and manageability and so on. IT controls, coordinates, and facilitates IoT. Control not in the sense of limiting, but control in the sense of ensuring that the necessary security is observed and the coordination is observed. It will also, in many cases, since IT will be coordinating multiple projects, will have business deals that provide some scale and benefits, so it'll have preferred tools. But IT is the place where the multiple IoT projects come together and become part of the corporate assets of the customer. And it supports this distributed innovation where the various OT organizations are coming up with new solutions, testing them against IT for feasibility and for limitations, and then helping them with the IT end of the implementation. And it supports toolbox, that is to say, products and services that are useful, that they provide central purchasing and price benefits. And then finally, we've reached a point where the platforms are pretty much commodities. This was the direction they've all headed, and for a while there was a platform from every vendor in the world, and we're now reaching a point where the major platforms, which are generally general application platforms with IoT extensions, are kind of the standard on which the company sets. And there are some critical differences among them, but they have more to do with both the requirements of the whole organization and the history of the organization than they have to do with appropriateness for specific solution. So choosing a platform, that is to say a central common platform for the data, is no longer a large part of the IoT solution problem. And one of the things that's been happening in the field is that the application of AI has been reduced in cost a great deal by the new processors that are proliferating in the field. It started with GPUs primarily from NVIDIA. Google came up with its TPU, its tensor processing unit. Field programmable gate arrays have been around for many years, but they're now being used very aggressively, particularly in the inference part of deep learning. Microsoft reports tremendous benefits from using FPGAs, and that is lowering the cost of the AI analysis of data, and that's going to lower the cost of all solutions, allowing a far larger number of solutions to be feasible and promoting the proliferation of IoT throughout the organization. And that concludes our presentation. I'd like to highlight that we do studies on commercial IoT. We have a benchmark which compares key vendors, how they're doing in terms of revenue and gross profit. We have a forecast that looks at the overall IoT market, at least from the IT vendor point of view, and what's happening with it, and we slice it by categories of vertical categories, kinds of products and services, and geography. And we have a market landscape that looks outward and looks at the pattern of solutions, partnerships, ecosystem, how they're happening across the globe. And that concludes our presentation. It's now time to move on to QA. So. Okay. The first question is about the availability of this deck for reports. Do we make the deck available?
They have to send a request. I've responded to that.
If you send a request, we will send you the deck. There is a replay available at all times. What is your view of the new GE digital organization that's focused on IoT prognosis for success? I'm going to not do the prognosis. There's a lot of constraints on that, but focusing on IoT, which was always GE's strength, on industrial IoT, obviously makes a lot of sense. GE, as many other ambitious, well-funded IoT companies, spent an awful lot very early on IoT, and it's simply the growth of this category simply did not match the ambitions of these many vendors. I think that they brought a lot to the table technologically. They were a pioneer, but they were built for explosive growth, and they did not realize that. Next question is how systems integrators play a role in the IoT market, and what will be the opportunities for them. Systems integrators at various levels, both the global ones, the large global ones, and the specific ones for individual industries or individual geographies, are a very important part of that ecosystem. They very much are in the role of defining their niche and finding complementary partners. In many cases, vendors of particular software or hardware solutions can bring them to market, and in many cases, they are general case systems integrators who are developing their IoT offerings so they can take their existing customers and take them in the direction the existing customers want to play. The trend, of course, is to reduce the entry cost, but still almost every one of these things, even packaged solutions, need some kind of implementation, and many of them need ongoing management once they're brought in. So IoT is a growth area for systems integrators. What we've seen with the more ambitious of the global systems integrators is they are still getting most of their customers from their existing customer base. Not a lot, some, but not a lot of new customers are brought in by their IoT capabilities, because in fact, the other systems integrators are also developing their IoT capabilities. So if you, a customer, have worked with a given systems integrator over the years, and now you're interested in IoT, chances are your system integrator will have come up to speed in IoT and be able to help you with it. The innovations of IoT will cause a certain amount of switching and a certain amount of opportunities to acquire new customers, but in many cases not as many as the system integrator would hope. How do we handle real-time response handling in the case of IoT? I'm going to defer kind of the technical questions here, but in general, what we're talking about is decreasing the latency in the communications channel, and this is one of the fond hopes for 5G when you're talking about wireless, and then edge processing, bringing the actual interaction with the data closer to the sensors. And of course, real time means something different in every situation. But accelerating that ability to respond is key for some applications. We're seeing a lot of use of accelerators, not a lot of use. We're seeing the beginning of use of AI accelerating hardware to decrease the response time, to decrease the latency by being able to respond very quickly to inputs. That's one of the advantages touted by the advocates for field programmable gate arrays. But it's a design decision. It's what exactly you mean by real time and what pieces of the puzzle do you need. Are trials something that is decided by businesses looking to leverage IoT? The trials, proofs of concept, are virtually critical in any large-scale IoT deployment. And in many cases, small-scale IoT deployments are, in fact, proofs of concept for larger-scale deployments. But smaller-scale ones, things that are packaged or bundled, in many cases, there's no need for a trial. There may be a checkpoint during the development cycle that says, now let's make sure we're on track. But as IoT becomes more expectable, more replicable, more variations on existing cases, there's less and less need for trials. Still, it always plays a role in large projects. Any comments on how IoT is supported day 2% to be B2B? I believe we're talking about support, which is often one of these things where a service organization comes into play and a service contract is enacted to provide that support.
You see this one, Ezra, that's been a hot topic around us between our telecom team recently is the question is, do you foresee clients waiting on 5G availability or rather jump ahead and implementing IoT now?
We have not seen a lot of applications where the benefits of 5G are required in order to implement IoT. That does not mean that use cases will not emerge, but we haven't seen a lot of this will work when we have 5G, or it will be less expensive when we have 5G. Let's defer. What you sometimes see is let's begin with LTE and 5G will make this better. That doesn't mean it's not out there, but those kinds of we're waiting situations are kind of hard to find, frankly. Do you think the IoT edge is being built to scale to support millions, then billions of devices? Think device security policy, activation, and pushing updates. In fact, yes, I do. If you need to centralize data from millions and then billions of devices, that is, one IoT solution requires millions and billions of devices, then you probably have a multi-tier architecture where there are edge devices, edge units that do the near the edge work, and then some consolidation in a central location. But we're seeing proliferation of the use of edge devices to do hardcore processing, to do AI training as well as inference, to handle all the kinds of authorizations and security. There are certainly solutions, particularly the widely dispersed and mobile ones, where direct to the cloud is the right kind of architecture. But the kinds of servers and storage that can be put quite near the devices, they're very substantial, and they can handle these tasks, and they run the software that does these kinds of things. How about leveraging Bluetooth signals from IoT edge gateway instead of Wi-Fi networks? Every kind of communication has its own set of parameters in terms of cost, latency, security, and those sorts of things. All of those go into the mix. The selection of particular kinds of communications and particular kinds of data transfer is part of the solution set. An IoT solution now becomes, in part, an exercise in mathematics, in satisfying a number of requirements. So certainly Bluetooth and low-energy Bluetooth is playing a role. Okay. Regarding OT-IT integration, how important is the role of digital twin and simulation? Appreciate your, thank you. Digital twin and simulation are growing and important when you talk about the larger scale projects, particularly in industrial. We think there's a lot of future growth going forward in both those categories as the digital twin software evolves and becomes more capable of allowing simulation. What we're seeing a lot of growth in is the smaller scale kind of straightforward things, but when you talk about complex systems, making a digital twin and testing it with simulations is very much part of the platform. And in terms of simulation, it should be less expensive to do that kind of work with some of the new highly parallelized, I hope I pronounced that word correct, processors. What is your view on the Cumulosity self-service analytics tool Trend Miner as part of empowering the IoT use? I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that tool. Where do you see budget shifting IT-OT? Who really holds the purse strings? Line of business OT? And is that shifting one way or another? I believe it is shifting more and more to LOB OT. They are the ones that need the IoT, know how it's going to benefit, can demonstrate the ROI, and often hold the budgets. You are reducing their costs, and IoT becomes a cost in the equation where OT is recognizing the benefit. We are seeing more and more use of camera image-based intelligence being fed into the IoT platforms, which is either in parallel to sensor-based solutions or in some cases eliminating the need for sensor-based solutions. Yes, we are too. And this is certainly an area where the new processors are important. This is an area that Google specifically called out in the introduction of its small TPU, saying you could build in it the cameras. This was the first of the bundled solutions being offered by Dell. It was video surveillance, and this is certainly an area where 5G will play a role, as it can handle the bandwidth necessary for camera image-based solutions. IBM has a kind of fault detection camera image-based solution that's quite reasonable in scale and can be brought into play rather quickly. What kinds of trends and influences do you see from a hardware sensor-related technology advances or wireless technology advances? How that influences the overall IoT use cases? The issue here is one of clear cost benefit. If a particular piece of hardware is either better or less expensive than it was last year, that opens up new solutions to being positive ROI. So the ongoing utilization of hardware technology, both the sensors and the data transmission, just broaden the base of potential IoT solutions. They're the key to making these things work. So if OT thinks, boy, we could really use something that did this, and they come and they talk with IT and try to cost it out, and the sensors are too expensive or the connections are too expensive, it's not available. But it's not available yet. It becomes available as the cost for those things decrease. On the topic of developing BP ecosystems, what sort of relationship do IoT vendors need to have with BPs? Are they expecting BPs to introduce the solutions to clients? My brain is not working. I don't know what you mean here by BPs, so I'm afraid I really can't answer this question, and I apologize. I probably know what you mean, and I'm just stuck. Are network providers doing enough to provide IoT products and services? Not so much telcos or SIs, but the actual network infrastructure provider. I think what is lacking is not so much IoT products and services as partnerships that together create IoT products and services. When you look at Dell with its bundles and packages, you're looking at a company that basically provides compute, servers, storage, a certain amount of networking, and it had to go out and find partners that together could help them create products and services. Doing it all on your own is generally not a good idea, especially if you are, as it seems to imply, network provider. You're a large company, unless you have a specific product or service that applies to a large enough piece of the market. By finding and cultivating the right ecosystem, you can take your technology and apply it to many smaller subsegments. And I just got a happy face with business partners. It's an answer to my question. Thank you. So business partners, yeah, that's what we're saying. Is this is critically important. I mean, this all comes down to the fact that it would only be a very small number of IoT solutions that come only from one vendor. They are, by their nature, an assemblage of multiple components. Now, those components can be pretty raw, in which case you have to do a lot of customization, or they can be ones that snap together more easily. A famous children's block company, whose name we may not mention. But getting the right partnerships is critical, and then delivering the product, because remember, the ultimate deliverer of the product has to really understand the customer's business, and every business is different. And if you're going to relatively smaller scale projects, large companies can't devote the resources to understand the nature of a customer business for a relatively small scale product. So the business partnerships are critical, and enabling your business partners to become more capable in delivering solutions that incorporate your components is critical to success in this area. 5G solves the problem of device to telco, but what role of interconnection companies like Megaport and Equinix to create flat, low-latency global interconnection platform to CSP clouds, AWS, Azure, etc.? I think I'm not familiar with Megaport. I am somewhat familiar with Equinix. I think that anything that lowers the cost of connectivity to the cloud will play a role going forward. The latency issues are ones that haven't yet really evolved as being critical. I do not discount that they might in the future, but right now we're not seeing a lot of, we could build this, but the latency is too great solutions. So it's hard to project the role that these interconnection companies will play in accelerating the connection. What you need is something where the addition of the new capabilities, as I say, lower latency, enables more solutions. We could build it, but the latency is too great. There are talks about those things in things like automotive and healthcare, but I haven't seen any killer solutions that say, this would be great, we can build it, but it simply takes too long to round trip the data. Have I answered all the questions? I think I've run to the bottom of the list. Oh, no, I see a couple more. This is great. Thank you for asking all these questions. This is wonderful. And that's enough to answer that, except to say thank you. How can telcos increase their revenues from IoT? I think that what telcos bring to the table is an interface to a very large number of diverse customers. And I think you see the Sprint kind of offering saying, we've got solutions, presumably they're provided in part by third parties, and we can take them to a large number of customers. They talk with everybody because everybody needs a telco service. So I think that's the real leverage point that telcos have. How do we handle real-time response handling in the case of IoT? I think I've addressed that. It's a combination of things and what you mean by real-time. What is your view on IoT connectivity? What percentage will be some variation of cellular versus wireline, Wi-Fi versus satellite? Well, we'd be happy to do some research on this topic. We haven't made a projection of it, and I presume the percentages in terms of revenue. Clearly, the places where wireless is got an advantage is widely dispersed and mobile. The places where wireline has an advantage is contained within a campus, particularly campus that's really easy to wire. But it really comes down to doing that cost-benefit analysis for each solution, and what will be the total volume of solutions that need one versus the other is a research question that we really haven't addressed.
We may not know the exact answer, but if you want to reach out to the webinar email address, and we could route you to our telecom team, which you might be able to engage in discussion with, and they might have a better idea. It's their subject of coverage.
How significant are differences between markets like smart cities versus smart factories versus consumer products, also on platform choice? They're very significant, and they're very different. One of the interesting things about smart cities is cities don't compete at the level of we're a smarter city than you. So a solution that works in one smart city, you will probably not run into a lot of barriers to take that down the highway or down the river to another smart city. Where we see these are proprietary solutions is when you're creating solutions for core differentiated product, which you're more likely to see in a factory setting. Smaller factories may be less concerned about that, but when you're doing a custom solution for a large industrial company and you've created a smart factory for them, they want to continue to own the IP that they've created. So there's a lot of difference there. So smart cities lend itself to packaged and bundled products because costs are really important, and because they don't care about that they're using something everybody else is using. Consumer products are a matter of driving forward the kind of hockey stick rapid adoption you hope to get with a consumer product. So that's a kind of high-risk proposition with a great reward if you win, which is very different from answering a particular customer's need. It's mostly about the creation of a product that is in itself compelling and then effective marketing and selling of that product. It's really more about the product than it is about the technology. Did I get them all?
There's one more about LoRa, but again, this might be one that we might want to forward to our telecom team. If you want to reach out to the webinar email address and get routed to them.
I will say in general that no one of these technologies is an everything killer. You know, your requirements in terms of data capacity, range, coverage, I guess is the term of art, latency, and cost is so complex that I'm not ready to call any of them a winner and a threat. I'm saying that, you know, vendors are advantaged if they can offer multiple choice there, because it really is a key to the design equation.
Yeah, it's like a toolbox, different tools for different applications.
Yep. I think we've attempted to answer all your questions. I really appreciate your listening in and your active participation. This has been just great. Thank you so much.
And please reach out to us if you have additional questions or you want follow-ups, and we're happy to answer your questions.
All right, everyone, if you have a few moments, we would appreciate if you could fill out the survey on your screen. A replay version of the webcast will be available after the event and will be sent out to you via email. To view a list of our upcoming and past webinars, please visit tbri.com. Be sure to join us on Wednesday, February 6th for The Pendulum Swings, Customer Demands Reshape How Infrastructure Vendors Do Business. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you all.